the level of confusion with regards to just what reality is very deep, and I think it's really perpetuated by school, like the way you're taught science and to picture reality is fundamentally wrong. First of all, people think in terms of little billiard ball particles bouncing around. They think in terms of time being a real thing, which is sweeping forward, and therefore you were created by a less intelligent process than yourself, and you are a sort of bounded soul that is separate, that is going to come to its own destruction. This is kind of the way that everyone who claims to be a materialist views things, and it's just wrong. The reality turns out to be a lot more close, actually, to what a theologist would claim, and that's just if you assume physicalism. And I was an atheist at the age of 10. My mother's tears were better than lip service to the Holy Ghost, and that's no exaggeration. I was very disagreeable. I valued truth, and still value truth, more than any tribal allegiance or even social cohesion. It's like, what kind of 10-year-old prefers the truth to, like, social cohesion with his mother and father, in the household at that age? It takes a certain kind of person. It's certainly not common, especially because I was never exposed to atheism. For all I knew, I thought I discovered it. I just opened up a world history textbook and immediately saw that there were all these other religions, and I thought, this is arbitrary. How could this be an accurate metric for truth? I just happened to be born into one random-ass religion out of all of them. And I'm certainly not going to make a case for any sort of, basic deism or theism, where you have somehow a creator here creating everything. A creator sets everything in motion, then everything happens, right? And we just happen to be here at 13.8 billion years after creation. This obviously makes no sense, because a creator would also have to be composed of more basic bits, right? It's like everything is built on more basic blocks. We know this, right? This creates something which is composed of a house is composed of bricks, in other words, and this creates bigger chunks, and so on. You get increasing complexity, and at bottom, it's physical laws. Complex things arise from simplicity. So obviously, that's what natural selection is. It created us from a simple process, and it created something which is far more complex than itself. And if you had something which was more complex, you would have to explain where that complexity came from. But actually, it turns out this idea of time going forward is physically impossible. It's physically impossible by relativity. So not a lot of people know about the theory of relativity or understand the theory of relativity, but you have reference frames. And I explain this way too much in way too many videos, right? But I'm just going to go at it again, just the simple idea. You have different reference frames, and from each different reference frame, you have a different future light cone and a different past light cone, right? And then you have a plane of simultaneity. The plane of simultaneity is what you could think of as the actual now. If there was any such thing as two simultaneous events or two simultaneous objects, they would exist in that plane of simultaneity. However, it is the case that no things actually exist in this plane of simultaneity, because you have to compare relative reference frames. So you wouldn't be able to interact or know about something that was actually, objectively, physically simultaneous to you. You would need, everything that ever happens is linked by causality. It's like, It has to be in your past light cone for it to affect you. And you have to be in the past light cone of something else to affect it. So think about what this implies for your experience. Your experience then must also be embedded in this timeless structure, because your experience is also made up of those pieces in relative reference frames. So whatever you think is causing your experience, whether you think it's neurons, whether you think it's the molecules at a more micro level than the neurons, because we don't know. We don't know what exactly are the computations specifying our experience. We know that consciousness is physical, because otherwise how would we be talking about it, right? If it was epiphenomenal, it wouldn't make sense that we were talking about it, because the fact that we're talking about it says that it's playing a causal role. It's embedded, and it's part and parcel of these physical constituents. What we don't know is how to cut the entire physical picture into bounded conscious observer moments, a conscious observer instance. That's the binding problem. We don't know how to do that, because it seems like we're not omniscient, right? I'm not omniscient. I don't feel at one with everything. So there must be somehow a binding into a particular experience. Nonetheless, like I was saying, all these constituents are in relative reference frames, whether we're talking about neurons or molecules. Molecules too, because even though quantum mechanics is more apparent at that level, you still have eternalism, because special relativity has been unified with quantum mechanics, with quantum field theory. So you still have this, you still don't have time. No matter how small you want to zoom into, there is no such thing as time. There's just these objects all in relative reference frames. So this has its own future light cone, its own past light cone, its own plane of simultaneity. And if you compare this to this, and they're in relative motion, it's like you're moving the plane of simultaneity. There's just no preferred basis for the entire thing. There's no actual now anywhere. There's no preferred now. There's no real now. So that means that your experience is just this eternal shape thing. It's just something that has constituents that are already in the future, they already happen, and things in the past that already happened, and they become integrated into this memory of the present, this experience of the present. We don't know how far back you could go. Like, why isn't there an experience going all the way back, way, way, way back to like when you were a 5-year-old kid, right? Why isn't there some experience there happening, being bound to whatever computations are occurring sort of more immediate with this? And in a way they are. They probably are. It's like these computations are building on top of each other. And so then it only takes building more self-modeling computations on top of this that's happening right now. Whatever's happening, everything that's happening can have stuff built on top of it in computational space. So if we build something on top of this, which is self-modeling, it will be the same situation as you having dream characters. Like, you have dream characters, and then you sort of appropriate them. You think they belong to you, to your dream. In that same way, we are dream characters inside other self-modeling computations that are built on top of these computations occurring right now. So, and this is happening without regard for time. Again, it's not like you have to wait for this to happen. It doesn't make sense, the very notion of having to wait for something to happen, because eternalism is true by relativity. So everything that's happening in the future, anything in our future light cone, in whatever future light cone you want to look at, has already happened from its location. So all experiences that were ever built on top of us, that ever learned from us, have already happened. It's just that you can't know what you're being played into, in the same way that all those neurons in a machine learning algorithm don't actually know what they're doing. They're having their weights and biases updated, but they don't know what the ultimate prediction in the territory actually is. Like, what is this entire thing attempting to predict? Or even what chaos theoretic goal am I playing into that? It's like you're just isolated. You're this little neuron that has no idea that it's a part of something much bigger that's actually achieving something. It's actually part of an algorithm. And then some people suggest that the binding problem, and therefore the bounded nature of consciousness, is the solution to a problem. Otherwise, it wouldn't survive by just natural selection, by Anthropics. And I agree with that. I take Anthropics seriously. I think that I am immortal. Because if I could be that which doesn't exist, it's like tautological, right? Like, I can't be that which doesn't exist. If I'm a physical configuration, if consciousness is physical, then you have to exist, no matter what. You can't be that which is not conscious of itself, because then that would imply that consciousness was not a physical process. It was something that was somehow hovering above, disembodied, and having no causal efficacy. So if we take Anthropic seriously, then we are immortal, and not only that, it kind of really explains the Born rule. It explains the Born rule. Like, if you don't know about the Born rule is what governs the probabilities of what we observe. So in quantum mechanics, you would actually expect that we would see everything. We wouldn't have a reason for why we see what we see as opposed to anything else. You wouldn't have a reason for why you should not take a gamble in a lottery, since after all, everything that can happen does happen if the wave function doesn't collapse. So there's an infinity of everything, but yet it seems like there are larger infinities than others, and this is governed by the Born rule. And then it so happens that the Born rule corresponds with the behaviors that a rational, perfectly rational Bayesian agent would show. So if that isn't proof of God, I don't know what is. It's like you are already embedded in that which is the most intelligent, because that's the only thing that survives. Necessarily, by natural selection, that which is most intelligent is going to take up all experiential mass. It's going to take up all experiential space. Because everything that's less intelligent can only exist insofar as it's a constituent of it. So that's it. Like, I guess at this point, if I was in 7th century Arabia, I would just, this is about the time I pick up a sword and go conquer people. But since I was domesticated by a polite society, I guess I'm just going to leave you with that. Oh yeah, and by the way, I forgot to say this, but there are psychological reasons for why we focus on this question as opposed to any other question. Like, why does anyone care about whether God is true or not? It has a lot to do with how we're wired. Because after all, I could just press random article on Wikipedia and focus on whatever comes up and evaluate those truth propositions related to that particular topic, and then no one would care, right? But then a lot of people care about this question. They care about this question, sure, for tribal allegiance reasons, but they also care about this question because I think it has a lot to do with your sense of confidence, your sense of self-worth. In order to have a strong sense of self-worth, confidence to push and go out into the world, you essentially have to murder Galileo and perform this heliocentric reversal, where it's like, actually, no, I am the center of the universe. I believe in me. I believe in this right now. So I really think it's a matter of confidence here. And of course, confidence has many components that go into it. I mean, obviously, there's a tremendous genetic component. For instance, in America, the population that shows the least amount of confidence are the self-identified East Asians, whereas the people that show the most amount of confidence are self-identified African Americans. And you wouldn't expect that from socioeconomic status, right? So there's absolutely a genetic component. But there's also a belief component to it, and that's why people care about this at all, as opposed to me pressing random article on Wikipedia and then talking about whatever, algebraic geometry or whatever article comes up, dung beetles. People wouldn't really gravitate towards that because it doesn't have that psychological juice that people are looking to be destabilized by. It's like they're looking to destabilize themselves or others in one way or the other, whereas to make you feel less important or to make you feel more important. And I think that's really the psychological crux of why people care about this at all. And so the reason for that is because I think I've discovered something important in the first place, because when you go out into the world with things that are false, you get refuted. Like, this is you, right? And then you go out into the world, and there are all these paths that you could take, but you have to pick one or the other. And if you're completely open, if you're just in ambiguity, and this is like openness, you don't know which one to pick because you're open to all of them. Whereas when you have a direction, and most of this is in the psychological literature, perhaps conscientiousness, but you could just say belief or faith in something, then you pick one and you go in that direction. But when you pick one of these arbitrary choices, they're not completely arbitrary. I mean, you do have criteria for selecting one or the other, but you go in one direction, you're going to get refuted. You're going to get refuted by natural selection. You're going to get refuted by the truth. So the truth matters to us a lot. And when you have truth about the ultimate nature of things, it feels empowering. It feels powerful because it's like, I know what's really going to happen. I know what I am. I know where I'm going. So in this case, when you look at everything that I've said, I want you to go and try to refute this. I'm putting myself out there and saying, refute this. Try. Go look this up. Go get educated and try. Because I think I've discovered the truth. And the truth is valuable because it's that which survives. That's the problem with religion, that you had to have faith in something which wasn't true. So how could you have faith when you know you're going to go out there, be exposed, and then have to accept, oh, well, I've been refuted. It was just a matter of my belief, my own personal imagination. That makes your faith weak. That's no kind of faith. So faith in truth is what we should care about. Like the actual truth that's going to survive confrontation with the process of refutation. That's what happens in morphological space, and that's what happens in the subspace of morphological space, which is meme space, which is our ideas. Our ideas also go out there and become refuted now that we have invented the scientific process. And that we value reason at all, right? So go out there and try to refute me. go refute me and fail, because I've tried. I don't want to believe in God because it went against my nature. But I believe I am a part of God now. I can't actually I either have to assume that intelligence is not physical, that consciousness is not physical, or that eternalism is false, and therefore relativity is false, and therefore that completely undermines my entire picture of how I go about forming a picture of reality through empiricism. So either everything, my entire structure is wrong, or physically God is real and I am a part of God. And therefore, bonus points, a lot of confidence.